Eboo Patel, the Ware Lecturer speaker at the 2013 UUA General Assembly, gave a talk. Gave a talk titled Standing Your Ground, Standing Your Sacred Ground. Unitarian Universalism is, shall we say, not particularly creedal. In fact, to put it gently, I've met not a few UUs who express some suspicion of creeds. So this is not a minor difference from my faith of Islam. This is not a, oh, cool, you like noodles, I like rice type of difference. This is a pretty major religious difference, and it is only the beginning. Sometimes I feel like when people speak about religious diversity, they have the impression that it's some kind of like interesting ethnic foods, a matter of taste, something that makes the neighborhood more interesting and raises everybody's property values. Actually, not really. Faith and philosophical traditions have both beautiful resonances and really profound disagreements. Religious diversity, I think, is about engaging both. And interfaith leaders have to be able to deal with this fact of religious diversity as profound disagreement directly.
So this past week, I attended United Days at my alma mater, United Theological Seminary of the Twin Cities. I was drawn to the focus of United Days, which feels so relevant to this month's worship theme of pluralism. The description of our days together was, we are living through perilous and divisive times. The idea of building walls that keep us safe from them is a vexing spiritual and theological problem, as much of a vexing spiritual and theological problem as it is a social and a political one. The description continued, how might faith leaders and congregations courageously and creatively engage in socially transformative action from a place of spiritual grounding and depth? How might compassionate listening and radical imagination help us forge new connections across lines of difference, build a more just world with others, and facilitate a revolution of values rather than fuel the flames of fear and hatred and exclusion? I love that the vexing spiritual, theological, social, and political walls of us and them, and how spiritual grounding and depth coupled with compassionate listening and radical imagination might be a way to deal with those, to break that wall down. It really was kind of music to my ears. I've been fortunate to be in interfaith circles for years, and I know that this congregation values interfaith relationships and learning as well. I'm a little sorry to report that I did not get the answer over those day and a half. I hate that. I always wait. I don't know. I'm still 61. I still show up like, maybe this will be the answer. And it, hardly ever is. But I do want to say that it continued to inspire and guide my thinking about religious pluralism and how important it is that we've been talking about this, working against fear and hatred and exclusion that eats at any possibility of what could be. So Toni Morrison said, the destiny of the 21st century will be shaped by the possibility or collapse of a shareable world. It's been fascinating for me over these past couple of months to be part of an exploratory team from MSUS, which has been meeting with an exploratory team over at New Brighton UCC about potentially renting space and finding ways to collaborate on aspects of church life, such as programs and social justice initiatives. Many of us in these groups has been teetering on the thin line between having faith in all the good that could come from being under one roof and sharing space versus this idea that we should occupy buildings as one single congregation, that sharing is scary, that there are unknowns. We would actually have to talk to one another and work through difficulties. We might impinge on each other's patterns, causing each other to be open to interruption or, God forbid, change. You can hear I say that with a little note of sarcasm. We've been saying it sarcastically in our group too. I'm not just saying it sarcastically to you. And the teetering has also been around theology. What would the more extreme atheist among us think about being housed in a Christian space? What would old school Christians think about sharing space with people who prefer to never hear the word God or Jesus or even worship uttered on their lips? A colleague of mine who sat next to me at one of the sessions at United Day turned to me at one point and she said, this has me thinking about the difference between inclusion and expansion. Ooh, I love it when moments like that happen. The word inclusion, which to me is something that I commonly think of, and then there's that kind of, when I think of inclusion, I think of this, you know what I mean? You're like bringing people in, you're including them. Where I think about that idea of expansiveness is this opening that leaves us somewhere where we've not yet been. It makes me think of these words of Rumi that I don't know. I return to this poem on occasion. It's a part of a poem. It says, out beyond our ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there's a field. I'll meet you there. Where the soul lies down in the grass, the world too full to think about. Ideas, language, even the phrase each other doesn't make any sense. Yeah, that word expansiveness, it's wide open. It takes us to the edge where connection and discomfort and possibility lies. When I took these two words, inclusion and expansive, to our last joint meeting of the UCC and New Brighton group and our group last Thursday night, it kind of cracked open a feeling between all of us and what we were sort of pointing towards. What if we dared to meet each other out in the place of the unknown? We have no intention of merging congregations if we do end up over there. We are deeply grounded in our own faith traditions, and we feel the care of each beloved community. But what if the phrase each other doesn't make any sense, and we can instead find places where the we makes more sense, and it's more alive and engaged and connected? What if, just as today, we will acknowledge our differences and similarities and meet there? In a workshop at United titled Deepening Our Roots and Engaging Our Differences, the facilitator said that mutual appreciation is the nexus of respect and compassion. I like those two words together, respect and compassion. And we spent our time together exploring our own theological histories. Consistently, when I read about living and engaging in a pluralistic world, there's this reminder that we need to know our own selves. And we need to be rooted, not trapped, because God forbid we're UUs. We need not be trapped in our faith, but we need to be rooted in our own identity and beliefs. And it's in that way, coming from the rootedness of self, that we can engage in the similarities, in the differences, in the way that allows for that expansive spirit full of possibility. So Meg Riley, who's the UU co-moderator, which is the highest lay position at the UUA, she says this about this language of Article 2 that Kathy read earlier. She said it's not an individual statement of faith. Pluralism comes alongside a number of other values, including interdependence, justice, equity, transformation, and generosity, with love. Remember that flower thing, that flower image, with love at the center. And that pluralism needs the context of all of these values so that it doesn't come to mean you can believe whatever you want, because those other values inform the pluralism that we share with one another when we're Unitarian Universalist. So I think I appreciate that reminder of that grounding. I appreciate her reminding of us that we have had disagreements in our own faith, and we've had shifts in our own faith, both when Unitarians and Universalists moved from being basically Christian faiths into coming together and merging in 1961, still holding that Christian inception. And then later, when the Transcendentalists came along, they brought their spiritual and theological discoveries of Eastern religions. And then later in the 1930s, in came the Humanist movement and the Humanist Manifesto. Riley says there has always been tension and disagreement in our faith. And now, just to close, just so you know, if you go to GA, Another way that our faith is having a deep disagreement right now is over the response to the war in the Middle East. Because there are people who identify as UU and Jewish, there's people who identify as UU and Muslim, there's people all across the spectrum who have many thoughts and feelings about this. So to live in a pluralistic world at this time is a hard way to live, and I can't imagine living any other way.
Our resistance to religious language, I believe, helps to account for the struggle that so many of us experience in trying to say who we are as Unitarian Universalists. My version of what Unitarian Universalism stands for is one God, no one left behind. Many of you, I know, are bothered by the use of the word God, but religious language doesn't have to mean God talk. David Bumbaugh observes that a vocabulary of reverence is implicit in humanism, which gave us a doctrine of incarnation, which suggests not that the holy became human in one place at one time to convey a special message to a single chosen people, but that the universe itself is continually incarnating itself, constantly inviting us to tease out the revelation contained in stars and atoms and every living thing. A truly religious language, writes Bumbaugh, whispers of a larger meaning to our existence and carries with it implications for how we should live. From the Reverend Bill Sinkford, former president of the UUA.
And these are the words of Reverend Earl Holt, who was on a commission of appraisal. These were spoken at General Assembly 2005. In community, we agree to disagree. And we not only agree to disagree, but to speak with those with whom we disagree and to stay together. The discipline of conversation is the discipline of encounter, not out of counterfeit politeness to seek to escape or evade addressing our differences of religious belief, which may be profound. The issues that matter most to us, both personally and in communities of faith, but to be, as a church, a place where we can safely share them with one another. In conversation, disciplined by a common commitment that our differences need not and must not divide us.
I'm sure many of you have seen the artwork that shows how a variety of the world's religious traditions state the Golden Rule. The wording varies, but it generally advises members of these different faiths to treat other people as they would like to be treated themselves. Humanism is not often included in these works of art, but the idea that we should treat people as we wish to be treated is also at the core of humanism. From reading these variations on the Golden Rule, one might conclude that the differences among various religions is minor, more a matter of style than substance. However, as Ivo Patel cautions us, we cannot focus only on the commonalities while ignoring the profound differences among various religions. Religion's diversity, Patel says, is about engaging both. He continues, interfaith leaders have to be able to deal with this fact of religious diversity as profound disagreement directly. While Patel's lecture focused on religious pluralism in U.S. society, the Article 2 Commission's proposed new language focuses on how we practice pluralism in our Unitarian Universalist Association. The Article 2 Study Commission proposes to include pluralism as one of 6 core values comprising the covenants among the member congregations of our UUA. The proposed language calls us to, quote, celebrate that we are all sacred beings, diverse in culture, experience, and theology. The proposed covenant asks us to learn from one another in our free and responsible search for truth and meaning, and embrace our differences and commonalities with love, curiosity, and respect. Pluralism is so important to Unitarian Universalism that the idea shows up not once but twice in our bylaws. Article 2 has an entire standalone clause which guarantees freedom of conscience to individual UUs. To quote from the proposed new language, Congregational freedom and the individual's right of conscience are central to our Unitarian Universalist heritage. Congregations may establish statements of purpose, covenants, and bonds of union so long as they do not require that members adhere to a particular creed. This clause is referred to as the Freedom Clause. Given that we are both a covenantal faith and a free faith, we can't avoid living pluralistically in our Unitarian Universalist congregations. So what about MSUS? Our congregation is diverse in the belief of its members. Let me share with you the results of the survey conducted by the search committee back in March. Okay. You will notice right away the diversity in beliefs among MSUS members. Many get inspiration from the natural world. Some of us are humanists, rejecting the supernatural and embracing reason. Buddhist beliefs firmly inform the spirituality of some of our other members. And there are also members who consider themselves UU Christians, theists who believe that God is active in the world, and deists who believe God created the universe but is not active in it. I'd like you all to especially note that 44% of respondents agree or strongly agree with humanist beliefs, while 24% disagree or strongly disagree. By contrast, 12 of us agree or strongly disagree with Christian or deist beliefs, while 78% disagree or strongly disagree with those. In some respects, this is not a surprising result. Most of us here were not raised in Unitarian Universalist or Unitarian Universalist congregations. Instead, many of us left childhood faith traditions that harmed us, and we carry a great deal of pain from our experiences. The messages of hate and rejection from the right-wing fringe of Christianity taints our perceptions of Christianity in general. Others of us had positive experiences with the Christianity of our childhoods, but came to reject its exclusivity and supernaturalism. Some of us are uncomfortable with prayer, which can make interfaith work challenging when some charities make prayer a part of their community services. We don't, as Bill Sinkford said, want any God talk. On the other hand, some of our members, the teachings of Jesus are an important source of inspiration. Prayer is a means of grounding and of comfort. God can have a variety of meanings to different people. It might mean the traditional image of God as male, but it might also mean a creative and loving force that pervades the universe. Process theologians conceive of a God with whom we co-create reality. I remember many years ago, Professor Robert Scott gave us a talk titled, "The God I Don't Believe In." His point was that for many of us, our rejection of God can be based on a rejection of certain aspects or depictions of God. Chances are the UU Christians, theists, and deists among us don't believe in the same God we humanists don't believe in either. How then do we practice pluralism here at MSUS? Eboo Patel and the Article 2 Study Commission come to similar conclusions about living pluralistically, and their conclusions resonate with our own MSUS values of authentic curiosity and courageous love. We can be curious about each other. We can listen. We can lovingly embrace our differences. We can let ourselves, as our UUA president, Sophia Betancourt, says, be influenced by those with whom we do not agree. We can be guided by the words attributed to Francis David, we need not think alike to love alike. We can put love at the center.